Welcome to the BioMedWire Podcast, powered by IBN. This original audio production delivers market and sector insights, as well as exclusive interviews with innovative executives shaping the future in fast-moving industries, and may feature a client partner of IBN or one of the 60-plus investor-focused brands within IBN's dynamic brand portfolio. As a multifaceted financial news and publishing company, IBN leverages its extensive distribution network, utilizing multiple proprietary corporate communication tools to introduce both public and private companies to a vast and diverse audience of investors, consumers, influencers, journalists, and other targeted segments of the public. IBN may have received compensation to produce this audio content. Please be sure to read IBN's entire disclaimers for full disclosures. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the next revelatory episode of IBN's BioMedWire podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to another BioMedWire podcast brought to you by the Investor Brand Network. I'm your host, Stuart Smith, and we are joined once again today by CNS Pharmaceuticals, specifically the CEO of the company, John Climaco. Now, CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, I should say, trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol CNSP. If you go to their website, cnspharma.com, there's actually a presentation right there on the homepage that I was interested in looking at. Let's welcome in our guest right now because, John, as I told you in our pre-record talk, I like to do a little bit of due diligence. Obviously, I like to do quite a bit of due diligence on the company, see who else they've spoken with. And I found it interesting before we jump into some of the recent news, as we get a refresh on who your company is and what your business model is and exactly which cancers you're targeting, I found out that this is personal for you. Your childhood experience is a driving factor for you, but not only that, your empathy for others suffering from this terrible disease of cancer is a driving force for you. So if you will, using that as the backdrop, tell us a little bit about who CNS Pharmaceuticals is for the new listeners and viewers.
Sure. So thanks for having us again. So CNS Pharma is a neuro-oncology focused drug development company. So we have a couple of molecules that we think are game changers. What's interesting about them is they're both traditional chemotherapy molecules. That is to say, they come from classes of drugs that have been around for a long time. So we don't operate in what I would call the sexy immuno-oncology space. What we operate in is the fundamental building blocks of oncology care, which still today in 2025, remains chemotherapy. The problem for patients and for clinicians in the space that we're in is that the cancers take place in the brain behind the blood-brain barrier, which is this very specialized network of cells and active and passive functionality that prevents otherwise helpful drugs from reaching the site of the cancer. And we believe that right there is basically the reason why a cancer like glioblastoma remains one of the two greatest unmet needs in oncology today, the other being pancreatic cancer. These are the cancers that if you get them, sadly, they are basically uniformly fatal. There is no cure. Patients have very little hope. And our mission is to change that completely, and we think we have the drugs to do it. So it's a tough space. It's a space that sometimes is referred to as not just a graveyard for patients, but for companies and for drugs. But we believe we have something a little bit different. We have tried and true molecules that come from classes that have been around in the clinic for 30 to 70 years. But the difference is that while those drug classes typically don't cross the blood-brain barrier and are of no use to brain cancer patients, are two examples, one being berubicin, a novel anthracycline, and the other being TPI 287, a novel abiotaxane. Both cross the blood-brain barrier very efficiently and destroy these tumor cells in the brain very elegantly. So, we operate in a very difficult space, very challenging space, but we are intensely optimistic and hopeful that the drugs that we have are game changers. And that is really our entire mission. I believe very, very strongly in focus. We have been focused on this space since the day we founded the company. We remain focused on this. This is our mission.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up in the last part because I don't know that I was going to be able to pronunciate it anyways, and I probably didn't get it all that well. Abiotoxin, something along those lines.
You got it.
That's the webcast I'm talking about that the
Yeah.
company hosted themselves at cnspharma.com. CNS Pharmaceuticals recently announced it has expanded its pipeline with in-license of late-stage novel blood-brain barrier permeable biotoxin for the treatment of brain malignancies. And so, far be it from us to bottleneck people in our information. We want you to, of course, visit us here at Investor Brand Network and follow us here on our various podcasts. But I had a chance to watch this, and I've also had a chance to see you interviewed by others, John. Very busy summer for you. I don't think anybody got vacation when I look at your press wire. I pull it up here and I look at the news out. You've been on a lot of virtual investor things. You've been on the road as well, out there telling people the story of your company. Looking back at 2025 as the CEO, let's talk about this year, not just this summer, but what do you see as some of your milestones this year, John?
Yeah, well, this has been a big year for us. First off, of course, we did deliver, top line results on our Berubicin trial, and it was a tough one. We didn't hit statistical significance or our primary endpoint, and so that was very difficult for us. However, the company was very well positioned cash wise. We have a second program, of course, TPI 287. So I think we weathered that storm. But for investors, I think they should know that what's really still very important to us is the fact that Berubicin, while it didn't hit its primary endpoint, demonstrated clearly clinically relevant and important efficacy data. Let me explain something to you by that, meaning that, we had a very important and critical primary endpoint in overall survival. We demonstrated an an improvement in overall survival of about 30%, which is what we expected. That unfortunately matched the control arm. So we didn't show superiority, but at this point, we still have patients on that drug. Over 2 years of treatment, stable disease, and continuing with their life. That is almost unheard of in glioblastoma. So we are refocusing and looking at that effort. Again, we are still following those patients and continuing to treat them. And, with the recent developments at FDA in terms of the potential for a new approval pathway, which they're calling conditional approval, which is really focused on these orphan diseases, of which glioblastoma is one, we remain very hopeful that there is a place for Berubicin going forward. At the same time, we weathered that and we continue to move that program forward. We have launched our TPI 287 program, and as you said, this was not a vacation summer for us. We've been intensely busy preparing to start a new trial of TPI 287 next year in recurrent glioblastoma patients. So there's an enormous amount of legwork that needs to be done to prepare a drug for trial, not just, of course, on the manufacturing side to get the drug actually developed and available for patients, but the study protocol, the approval to proceed from FDA, all of those things have to be done. And that's really what we're working on now. So, I guess what I would say about us is, as a function of our focus and total dedication to this space, we did not miss a beat. When you have a drug development company, you've got to realize that, look, 90% of oncology drug trials fail. Those are the odds that you're facing. The odds in glioblastoma are even longer. That doesn't dissuade us at all because we know these drugs work. We have to prove that. That is our job. And so, when we pivoted from our Berubicin study to our TPI 287s, we didn't miss a beat. We have repurposed all of the work that we did to develop a global clinical network for Berubicin over to our TPI program. We really just seamlessly moved forward on that. And that is really what we have been doing all summer, as well as you said, getting out on the road, making sure that people understand, look, we are charging forward. We had a setback, but you know what? It didn't stop us because our dedication to this space and these patients remains, absolutely the same as it's always been. We believe that we have meaningful compounds here that can change the course of this disease for patients. We have seen it. We know these patients. As I said, we have patients that are still on our Berubicin study 2 years after they started. Now, remember, these are patients whose life expectancy when they started with us should have been about 6 months. Mm-hmm. So we've seen a very, very positive impact of our drug. We have to look at that. We have to move forward with our TPI program. And those are the things that we do because, again, to me, in some ways, that's the luxury, that's the benefit of having an intense focus. The mission is very clear. It's never wavered. We've never wavered. We don't get, dissuaded or heartbroken by setbacks. We just keep going because this fight goes on. We want to help these patients. We want to see these drugs approved. That's how we benefit the patients. And of course, that's how we benefit our shareholders.
Boy, that's really coming through right there. So not missing a beat is the direct result of your steadfast mission and vision and staying true to that. And that's what's driving your company and building the foundation for moving forward. So as we look towards wrapping up, I know it sounds crazy, but the kids are about to go back to school. Before you know it, we're going to be in the month of December 2025. What's driving your company and what are some of the milestones or achievements that you have laid out personally for the company?
Sure. So, again, it all falls right in line. What drives us is getting TPI 287 into the clinic as fast as possible. We want to see that trial started in the first half of next year. So that means a huge amount of front end work to prepare our investigators, to prepare the protocol, to prepare the drug supply, to prepare our filings with FDA, to prepare that regulatory strategy, to really just tear apart the statistical model underpinning that trial and make absolutely certain that no stone has been unturned and that we make sure we have the very best study with the very best focus and the very best chance of a positive outcome that we can. So that is really what we are doing. You'll see announcements to that effect. We've got some other exciting things going on around our drugs that I can't really get into now, but suffice it to say that, again, as a team, when you are as focused as we are on a single mission, we are constantly scouring the biotech space for other technologies, for partnerships and relationships that may help us in our mission. And, this is a space that, as challenging as it has been globally, we are not the only ones who are dedicated here. So there are some really interesting things going on in GBM, and we try to pull as much of those things as we can into our work. So I would say, folks can look forward to some very exciting things coming from us in the future in that regard. And, at the end of the day, you brought it up in the beginning. I mean, my experience, I lost my father to bone metastatic prostate cancer, a very tragic end for him. And a disease that, again, when you hit that point, there's very little hope. And so I do have personal oncology experience in seeing what a disease like that can do, to a patient and a family. And while of course we are mission driven for our shareholders, our job is to create shareholder value. At the end of the day, as I said earlier, we don't create shareholder value unless we get a drug approved. That is our mission. That is what we do all the time. But the reason that we want to see a drug approved is really for the patients, because it's difficult for most folks to imagine a lightning bolt like a GBM diagnosis, where out of the clear blue, typically your patients go from living a very, thriving, full of life, heart of life, let's say late 40s to early 60s in your prime, to a fatal diagnosis, with a life expectancy under a year and no hope for a cure. To me, that is an unacceptable outcome. And the dozens and dozens of patients that I've met and had the honor of meeting and talking to their families, those are the folks that really encourage us. Those are the folks that inspire us. But because when you see the courage that these people face this terrible diagnosis with, we say to ourselves every day, you know what, we can do better. Better is a possibility. We can bring hope to this space. And the reason we feel so strongly about that is because we've seen it in the data. We've seen our patients live longer. We've seen our patients with stable disease. We've seen our patients thrive. And so we continue on every single day knowing that we have to bring these drugs to the market to get them to the widest group of patients globally that we can.
Well, you are dialed into the Investor Baron Network, and not only that, our BioMedWire podcast, easy for me to say. We're speaking with CNS Pharmaceuticals. Again, their website, cnspharma.com. John, obviously, you laid out very clearly for us right there what drives you, what is your passion here. The big thing for me here is to give you the soapbox now to wrap up this interview. And you talked about how you deliver value to your shareholders. but maybe a word to your existing shareholders, and then of course the potential investors that might be out there. Why look at ticker symbol CNSP right now?
Sure. I mean, I think, we're a company that's been undervalued from the beginning. And look, when you look at the global landscape around GBM, in a way, you can understand why. Most companies have failed here. There's been very little progress in the last 20 years. But I think our approach is a logical one, because rather than starting with something that sounds sexy, but you're not sure if it works, we said to ourselves at the very, very beginning, what if we started with something that we know works? We know anthracyclines have treatment effect against these type of tumors. We know that taxanes have treatment effect against these type of tumors. The trick was getting them across the blood-brain barrier to the location of the tumor, and our molecules do that. So we have always felt that the deck was stacked in our favor, and we need to chip away day by day at the blocking and tackling work to see these drugs approved. It's a long slog. We really deeply appreciate our shareholders' commitment and patience with us, their support over the years to continue this mission. And for new shareholders, I would say this, when you look at the market cap of the company, when you look at the opportunities in the space overall that a drug like berubicin or TPI 287 could have, not just in the primary brain cancer space, but in the metastatic space, the triple negative breast cancer, where 40% of patients have a metastases to the brain, the multiple and the size of the potential market for these drugs is absolutely enormous. They come from classes that have been around for a long time. The classes of drugs as a whole are safe and effective. Our job is to demonstrate that they can do both against brain cancer, and we will succeed against that. So we think this is a great opportunity. Drug development is a tough business. It's a long lead time, but we are deep into it. We have demonstrated what I believe is absolutely world-class operational expertise and the ability to bring a trial through to completion on time and on budget. We'll do it again with TPI, and we hope that we'll have a positive result, and we'll be on our way to a drug approval.
Well, John, your passion has permeated this entire interview consistently from start to finish, which means my job was easy. Wonderful to meet with you and speak
Likewise.
with you here today on the BioMedWire podcast. Thanks for your time, John.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. For John Climaco of CNS Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, traded on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol CNSP, this is Stuart Smith for the Investor Brand Network, saying thanks so much for tuning in.
The BioMedWire Podcast is an original content production powered by IBN, a multifaceted financial news and publishing company that delivers next-generation corporate communication solutions. Utilizing proprietary corporate communication tools such as news aggregation and syndication, social communication, and brand awareness techniques, among others, IBN introduces both public and private companies to diverse audiences to enhance reach and recognition. IBN may receive compensation for services and solutions provided to its client partners. You should assume that the owners, officers, and directors of IBN or financial analysts mentioned in this production may hold a position in and may intend to trade the securities in their own accounts. This production is not an offer or recommendation to buy or sell any securities that may be mentioned in this production. The information in this broadcast is presented solely for informative purposes and is not intended to be or should it be construed as investment advice. As in all investments, investment in the featured companies carries inherent investment risk. Listeners should review the companies thoroughly with a registered investment advisor or registered stockbroker. This production by IBN is not purported to be a complete study of the featured company or other companies mentioned. Information used in statements of fact have been obtained from featured companies and other sources but not verified nor guaranteed by IBN as to completeness and accuracy. Such information is subject to change without notice. Please see IBN's full disclaimers and disclosures at www.ibn.fm/disclaimer. Music in this episode is by Infraction. For more, visit inaudio.org.